by the military-industrial complex.
I'm just a patsy.
I have a dream.
I said this once or twice, but it bears repeating. If you like your current insurance, you will keep your current insurance.
When you think about the Army and the Navy and the missions they run to protect the world, they run on SAP.
Well, you have done a really spectacular job. I guess pretty much everybody at this table is your customer, so that's not so bad.
Exactly.
I want to congratulate
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you.
And we're back. Peter Dukes here with George Webb. How you doing, George?
Great. It's great to be back in the U.S. of A., and it's great to have internet, and it's great to be heard. I hope my sound is okay. And we can spend as long as people want, because we've had internet troubles plus travel troubles, and now this is the big catch-up.
That's right. And I was having my own internet issues earlier today, but it's because I came back from a trip and I shot a bunch of pictures, and my machine, in all of its magical wisdom, automatically backs all that stuff up to the cloud without telling me. And so I was having terrible issues this morning until producer Carrie, in her infinite wisdom, said, "Is your backup on?" And as soon as we turned it off, all the internet problems just went away.
Happy life, happy wife, or happy wife, happy life. That's the way it is.
Happy wife, happy internet.
There you go. Well, Peter, last time I was in a very, very small hotel room in Dijon, France, next to a military airport, which I believe was selling long-range missiles, a new class of long-range missiles to Ukraine. I believe the European Space Agency. I'd been to Paris. I went back to Paris after this, but I believe that they were selling the over the horizon capability, so that they could target generals, Russian generals.
So those are not flat Earth hypersonic missiles. Those are global.
Yes, those missiles really will hurt you.
So here's a conspiracy theory for you. What if the globalists know that there's a flat Earth? Then
they're really screwed.
Isn't that really the wink?
All the money we paid out for for the Hubble telescope to do our reconnaissance, and it was all just fake. It was all just Pietro Benassi just selling us fake recon photos. It goes all the way back to Kennedy and the U-2.
Right.
No, I mean, whether Hubble was used or not, I mean, I had said Hubble was used. We had pulled out this litany of people that were Benassis in NASA and in.
You're talking about your Substack today.
Yeah, but I was surrounded, I mean, literally by 12 guys, gendarmes, staying in the rooms in my little cracker box hotel. We're talking €50 a night hotel. 2 guys, fully armed, fully dressed. When I left my room, they opened the door, and here all these fully armed guys are. Now, maybe they all just decided to leave at the same time I did. 2 huge vans of them. And the day before, I had gone to visit a person in central France. They had said that they were going to maybe give me some good intel. They follow you. And they were kind enough to put me up in a hotel. And the hotel that I was put in, the guy was a Ukrainian arms dealer, and with 2 bodyguards, armed bodyguards, and that was the only room left in the hotel. And he was working.
Was it the Honey Pot Slaughter Pen Hotel?
It wasn't the Honey Pot Slaughter Pen. It was just a slaughter pen hotel. but this guy, the owner of the place, said, yeah, he's going to Bourges, Borges, which is the old place where the military school was. It was the old cannon factory. Now it sells these missiles, and they're doing deals. And I said, hey, I think a deal's going to go down here. And they want to hit these Russian generals. They're going for decapitation strikes. Pietro Benassi, I'm sorry I'm outing the NATO program, but these new, it's called high Mars missiles, are not to disrupt the supply line for Russia further back, going beyond the 50-kilometer limit. They're to take out specifically decapitation strikes on Russian generals to demoralize Russian generals. And the way this story broke about a month ago, where all these generals were being killed in the field in Ukraine, Russian generals. How is that happening? We had said that this ship called the Moskva was hit over the 50-kilometer range, and we said SpaceX was the one that shared the data. Max Benassi, high at SpaceX. I'm not trying to implicate Max Benassi.
There's a Benassi at SpaceX?
Max? He's in LA. He's over by you, Peter. He works for the guy
in El Segundo.
He works for the Boring Company, I believe. That part of Elon Musk's operation for doing the tunnel, the LA tunnel, the big LA tunnel. But yeah, but we had said that SpaceX had provided it originally.
Well, the last time I checked, now there might be a different LA tunnel, but there was there's a environmentalist agitator that I know named Wendy Ann Rosen. And Wendy Ann, Elon Musk wanted to dig a tunnel from Van Nuys Airport to LAX. And she stopped that. She said, oh, there's an erudition, or what do you call it, where two plates come together, the Santa Monica Mountains, or where two plates come together, and you can't build a tunnel through those plates like that. And she got it canceled.
Yeah, I think that was the old subduction zone.
Subduction zone, that's right. Yeah.
But I think Elon, is trying again, and they are doing alternative sites. And they were going to build the big railway from San Francisco, Sacramento to LA. I think that's still bubbling. But all these public works projects always mean that money's getting diverted to something else. So anyway,
right, the money is going into the ground, and you don't really know where the money is going into. It's like putting money in space. You don't really know where the money is going. Putting money into the ground, you don't really know where it's going.
It is technically a black hole. so they're not really lying when they say we're observing a black hole. And every once in a while, they supposedly take a picture of a black hole. But really, the black hole, and this is CERN. I was at CERN for 3 weeks. In Geneva. And
well, do you think that that's where the $23 trillion that Catherine Austin Fitts says is missing is going?
Well, I think she is more the finance person, and I definitely think that these big mega projects in Europe are just that. They're fronts for whatever Klaus Schwab wants to put his money into. I went to Ravensburg for a long time, 4 days. And I didn't see any of the things going on, like building turbines. It seemed like they were working on tunneling equipment. And I'm like, this does not compute. And small nuclear reactors.
Well, a turbine is just kind of a tunneling device is just kind of a dirt turbine, isn't it?
Well, not the plasma-driven ones.
The plasma ones. Now you're jumping back 5 years, George. This is where you started. The nuclear-powered... Yeah, tunneling equipment. This is what you were talking about 5 years ago.
If you look at Max Benassi's picture in LA, he has the plasma turbine for tunneling on his website and LinkedIn. I mean, it's not me putting it out there; it's Max Benassi.
Well, I like the first time I heard you say that, I could probably do it while we're talking, but or maybe producer Carrie can find me. Can you find me? There's a YouTube video on. I think it's Dark. It might be Dark Docs is the YouTube channel where they're talking about Russian nuclear-powered underground submarine. They called it an underground submarine.
Yeah, well, I'd actually had a person who was at Sandia National Laboratories. It's such a crazy story, but it's out there. Sandia National Labs was working on something called Star Wars Initiative, SDI, for Ronald Reagan, and
Right.
a part of the strategy was to fire at very high propulsion pebbles. Pebbles. They call the program Smart Pebbles, and the idea was like just taking a shotgun to try to knock a clay pigeon out of the sky if a nuclear missile's coming. The same idea was for smart pebbles. But the actual use for smart pebbles, and we can go into how they can juice the containment vessel up and then release the containment vessel, and I believe Schwab's involved in this. But you basically have these high energy pieces of like very heavy matter, like heavy metals, and then they fire through, and it's just like a knife through butter. It makes tunneling go really super fast. And if you're in oil, if you're in gas, if you're in rare earth metals, precious metals, you love that kind of thing.
Oh, it's in the private chat. All right, here we go. La, da, da. All right, opening a new tab. Okay, I'm going to. I'm being distracted. So, Soviet nuclear battle mole. Oh yeah, here it is. Here, one second. I will just bring this up, just so that people don't think that we're making this stuff up. This is Dark Docs, the Soviet nuclear battle mole, an underground Cold War battleship. And I will bring that up. Stop screen, share screen.
Arms race. Both the US and USSR were testing top-secret, cutting-edge technologies that seemed beyond belief. Yuri Adamov, in his book Conquerors of the Underground. These science fiction imaginings were followed by real-world designs and prototypes during the 20th century, commencing in 1904 with the first underground self-propelled combat unit as designed by the Russian engineer.
Oh, anyway. So, Soviet nuclear battle mole. If people want to fact check us, there it is.
Yeah, and again, there's so many haters on the internet that hate people who actually go to the places and actually observe and live there for a week, right? There are just so many people that just hate that concept. They just want to be able to say some guy sitting in a basement, H.A. Goodman is the one I always point
Whatever
to.
happened to that? Is that guy still around?
He's still talking about Sandy Koufax and the poster he has. But I'm just saying that I'm not trying to say that he can't do the news or whatever, read the news, but don't go after people who are actually going to the places.
Right.
And what I saw with my own eyes was no high-tech turbines. I didn't see any small nukes or anything. I saw 5 or 6 engineers every day leave at about 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 o'clock, depending on how late they worked. And they were working on advanced concept design. One was a car, advanced concept car. Another one's advanced concept turbine. Another one's advanced concept nuclear, etc. And you just hang around when they go out to eat and listen to their conversations, and that's what they talk about. So it's not what you think it is. It's not like some big, factory, and he's making all these things, and he's got all these robots going, and everybody's got their self-implanted chip, and they don't realize they're not sleeping and they're all slaves. None of that is going on in Ravensburg. It's an old 1950s Cold War town that has seen better days. And it's just being used now. This huge 1960s factory or 50s factory is being used as a couple of places doing advanced concept design with really big monitors, 32-inch monitors, top grade, and they're doing CAD. And that's what's happening in Klaus Schwab's Escher Weiss, Ravensburg.
So you put out a Substack today, I see.
I did. It's
the George Webb Russian blood smear, and I've read it once, but I thought maybe you could take us through it because you jump around a little bit from from CNN to using the Hubble telescope for surveillance and some other things. So tie it all together for me, George.
Okay. So I write these things in 7-hour sitting. So I just start and go to the end, and then I'll come back later and edit. So it might not all be 15th draft quality, but the basic idea is that there's this very anomalous statistic in the Ukraine war that doesn't match any other war. And that's the number of Russian generals killed in battle. That's very unusual that you will have a Russian general killed. And so I started hypothesizing and then trying to find out how this is happening. And usually when something like this happens, there's a Joseph Benassi. I said I need a Java guy, Peter. I said I need a Java guy to connect the Hubble telemetry to the Russian long-range rockets. And
You think Hubble is using Java?
Well, Hubble has wrappers that you can get to Java.
Okay.
So anyway, he was at Goddard. This Joey was at Goddard. He's a genius kid. I'm not saying in any way he was connected to any kind of Russian blood program, but this thing turned into the reason why I think generals get killed. And don't go too much further than Richard here for a second. There's
Okay.
Joey. There's Joey at NASA. He's at NASA Goddard. You can go up one to Richard at NASA Goddard. But the bottom line is Russian generals get killed because they don't think the enemy has the capability of hitting them. They're outside 50 kilometers. So they go, hey, I'm safe. And then they get surprised when something goes beyond the 50 kilometers. So HIMARS can go 80, 70 kilometers. This other upgrade can go 500 kilometers. That's why the Russian generals are getting killed. And they're creating confusion in the ranks. But the problem is once you go more than the curvature of the Earth, 7 to 12 miles, depending on if it's a clear day or not, you can't see anymore. And it's like having a bike with no wheels. You need telemetry. You need a Joey. I'm not saying you need Joey Benassi specifically, but if you want to hit anything, you want to hit a general's armored personnel carrier, you need to hook that Hubble or whatever your spy telescope is that's providing your telemetry to the missile real time to hit it. That's just fact. And since Joey had done that job of real-time stuff with the Hubble, I thought, well, why not throw Joey in the story?
Why not throw Joey in the story? And why not throw the Hubble in the story when, Richard Branson just launched, 12 military satellites a few miles from my house a few weeks ago. Maybe a week ago.
I talked to a guy from Pasadena. He came out to visit me and Star Task Force in Maryland. Mm-hmm. He was from the Jack Parsons project out there, the JPL. Yeah. And he did Mariner and he did Voyager photographs of Mars and all the way Saturn. And he was the guy that worked in optics and imaging. And he said it's all about pixels. And the bigger plate that you've got, that's like a grid. It's like one of those square grids that he compared it to a manhole cover.
Right.
And the more holes you have, the more places you can put a pixel, the better your resolution is. And he compared it to throwing coins. And whatever coin, wherever the pixel goes in, wherever it goes in, that's a pixel.
Right.
And the Hubble has a massive, massive, massive retina. That's just the bottom line. And all you have to do, because it's Hubble's cylindrical, and European Space Agency controls Hubble, all you have to do is rotate it like a can, 180 degrees. And now, instead of taking fuzzy pictures because somebody supposedly didn't grind it right in Connecticut, now I'm seeing the epaulets on a Russian general.
You're reminding me of that. That was a very odd story. They launched. I mean, how often have you ever launched a multi-billion-dollar telescope, gotten it up into space, and realized you had the wrong lens in it? Right.
Well,
and then you had to send the space shuttle up to make a repair on it when it was already in space.
See, I think it was for military purposes all along. It came out in 1990, so it's 30 years up there, right? And what happened was the Danbury, I can't remember who did the grinding now, but I think it was a company in Connecticut, Danbury, Connecticut. It was something like Morton Thiokol, but it wasn't Morton Thiokol, but it was a name like that. And they took an extra 1/50th of an inch off. And it turns out, going just from the space guys I've talked to, going out, there's some kind of correction that they do, or going in because of the Earth's atmosphere, there's a correction, and going out, there isn't a correction. And it was tuned for the Earth, not tuned for going out. So it might be a big cover story to begin with. But anyway, like you say,
you mean it was sent up as a spy satellite and they were going to call it a space telescope, and then when they found out that it didn't actually work as a space telescope, they had to make it work as a space telescope? Something like that?
Yes. And a task force and I used to go down to the Smithsonian Space Flight. We used to see the Keyhole satellite. She called the Hubble Keyhole 2 because it was a bus-sized satellite. It looked so much like the Keyhole.
And Keyhole is what Google Earth was originally called.
And that comes from the Keyhole relationship at SAIC. There was actually 12 Keyhole
satellites. I worked with the Keyhole team when I built the Step into Liquid Windows Media high definition disc on that movie because Keyhole had not been bought by Google yet. And I created a Google map that had all the secret spots in the movie, Step into Liquid, where you could go if you they wouldn't tell you in the credits of the movie where the secret spots were for surfing. But if you bought the Windows Media high definition disc and you installed Keyhole onto your Windows Media Center PC, you could actually find out where the secret spots in Step into Liquid were.
Another great Bill Gates marketing concept. The Windows, did you call it the Media PC?
It was called. Here's my take on it. Okay, I was the creative director on the Windows Media high definition disk project, which was $1 billion. I think Microsoft wound up spending like $1 billion on trying to get Windows Media high definition disks out into the world to compete with Blu-ray and HD DVD. But I think, honestly, it was a stalking horse. I think what Microsoft was spending $1 billion on was to put so much confusion into the disc market. They wanted people off of discs. They didn't want people buying discs anymore. They wanted people streaming media. And Windows Media was highly optimized for streaming. And for all I know, what you and I are talking to each other on right now and how everybody is watching us is some kind of Microsoft product. I don't know that for a fact, but it wouldn't surprise me if it were. But they didn't want consumers quickly running from DVD to HD DVD. They wanted consumers going from DVD to streaming. And so the idea that there was going to be another disc platform out there meant that it was going to retard the development of streaming services by like another 5 to 10 years. So they wanted to just kill it. And I think that what Microsoft did is that they created so much confusion in the market by creating this HD DVD, their own version of HD DVD, that it threw all of the kind of standards organizing processes into a tizzy. And then all of the discs kind of failed after that. I mean, Blu-ray kind of came out, but it was pretty much stillborn because it was already competing with HD streaming services by the time it came out.
Well, Real Player was a customer of mine. I remember they had a codec, and then there was somebody else, and then they merged. They were fighting it out, and then those two of them merged, and that pretty much killed a disc-based. Because if you can do it in a browser, folks, and just download a plugin, come on, man. Let's move on. And you
can watch George and Peter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can watch us. So getting back to the gist of this thing is, I'm in France. I feel like I kick over the bucket on this long-range missile thing that's killing these Russian generals. I think I kick over the Benassi plan here to kill these generals. Somebody else explained to me how you do this without the support of the military satellites. The U.S. has denied not giving pinpoint access, real time anyway, to the Ukraine.
You use iPhones?
Well, that means that's sophisticated because these guys aren't carrying. They can carry an encrypted BlackBerry military grade encryption. So you think that you can find the Russian general's iPhone really easily, but it's actually a lot harder than you think, right? I agree with you. That's how you kill a terrorist. That's how you kill an ISIS guy or.
What if he's got a green zone phone that he bought from Michael Flynn?
I think that's just another ruse. 10 years.
I'm not saying that. I'm just asking.
10 years of good drug running, and then one day you get hit with the MQ-9 and you're done. Just like the guy for ISIS just happened in Syria. It's like they use you for 10 years and then boom, just like a mafia runner, you're dead. But anyway, with the Russian generals, there's nothing that could possibly explain. And I'm not trying to help Vladimir Putin, but this is how the story ended up getting twisted. That all the Benassis that you'll see, the Richard Benassi, you'll see Max Benassi, you'll see Joe Benassi, Lino Benassi, like Linotype. Remember Lino Benassi?
Mm-hmm.
He runs the Italian bank and Italian insurance giant INA. He goes back to the paperclip guys. Or all these guys. Is Benassi the new word for paperclip? I don't know. But it is the only believable hypothesis for how all these Russian generals are getting killed. It's not the missile, it's the telemetry. You've got to have the telemetry. It's just like dumb munitions in World War II. And first smart munition actually was developed in Ravensburg at Dornier, that over-the-horizon problem. Klaus Schwab's Ravensburg. But you have to have the telemetry until you get to target.
As opposed to Joseph Kennedy Jr.'s guided munition. Did you ever hear that story?
Where he was going to be the pilot of a big bomb.
Well, it was like, I had a book on it when I was a kid. I wonder what happened to it. Joseph Kennedy Jr., John F. Kennedy's older brother, was involved in a project where they took a B-17 that was the first remote-controlled B-17 ever created, and they cut the top off of it so that the pilot could off of the cockpit so that the pilot could bail out. Basically, the pilot had to take off and get the thing flying, and then there was a C-47 or something would be radio controlling it, and the pilot would jump out, and apparently. I think the thing exploded with him in it.
Yeah. And they thought, what an easy way to get rid of a potential candidate. We'll get Nixon in after the war, and we'll get all these paper clippers in to our national labs. They thought the Kennedy kid, the other kid, the good-looking one, we got him with this this German femme fatale, and he was dating the German gal. So he'll never be president. We'll never have to worry about him even as a senator. But little did they know that would turn into the Duke Report. So there you go.
Oh look, Dave Underdown once again. Elliot Roosevelt was Joe Kennedy Jr.'s commander.
Is that Kermit? Is he talking about Kermit? Because Kermit also was with the 101, and he was the one who seemed to be at Utah Beach, the fifth landing, the fifth beach, the fifth secret beach was added right at the end. And isn't that where Rommel's chief of staff and a lot of the other people ended up leaking out?
Hans Speidel?
Hans Speidel ends up running NATO. There's more to the story. Isn't he the same guy? Isn't Kermit Roosevelt the same guy who overthrows Mossadegh? And that lays the groundwork of fear for Henry Kissinger to create OPEC.
I'm still kind of catching up with the Roosevelt things because I'm trying to balance the Matthew Ehret FDR is a good Roosevelt story with the Teddy Roosevelt slipping in right after McKinley gets murdered, right? Teddy Roosevelt gets installed after somebody else gets murdered conveniently and becomes president, and then nationalizes the parks because the federal government should preserve beauty or something?
No. The federal government should preserve Rockefeller potential future oil wells.
Indeed.
Because they had cut over from the Navy from coal to gas. But continue.
Yeah. So anyway, so I'm still trying to, maybe Dave Underdown or some Mark Kulak can help me like straighten out which Roosevelts are okay and which Roosevelts are not okay.
Yeah, Dave is saying that Elliot is the son of FDR, and I'm not as familiar with that Elliot. I'm more familiar with Elliot and ET, but I don't know that one. But Kermit is an interesting guy as well that does the overthrow of Iran. And that gets to my point, which is if I cannot create fear in the elite, then I do not control the elite. But if I create fear in the elite, right, and overthrow one of the kingdoms, okay, I overthrow the Shah, then all of the other ones in 1970.
Or if I can hit a general with a over the horizon.
Now I create fear. And now
Yeah.
the generals are going to be like, hey, we don't want to do this. So any cartel, remember, a cartel is not a conspiracy of people cooperating with each other, natural partners. A cartel is a group of people that are natural competitors that fear a greater ill more and are working together. And it's the person who controls the fear.
Which I would refer to as the Cecil Rhodes doctrine, right?
Cecil Rhodes, Henry Kissinger, Alan Dulles play this role. That's why I say in all this, how do you take down the deep state? Everybody wants to go after the fingerlings. Oh, let's go after the Saxe-Coburg, Windsor family. Let's go after, this.
Well,
this.
that's the psyop of hero movies, and in the predictive programming community, people like Jay Dyer talk about the idea that part of the reason that we're inculcated with this kind of hero worship or in James Bond movies, it's always one guy, right? It's always Goldfinger. It's always Dr. No. It's always Blofeld. There's one guy. And if you could take out this one guy, then you can stop it. And the reason that psychological warfare message is kind of put out into the world is because they want people, normies out there in the world, to think, oh, if we get the right guy in the presidency, he's going to save us. Or if we take the right guy out of on the bad guy side, then the world's going to be a happy place. But these things are very well organized. They are groups of people. They're not a single person. If you take one of them out, there's plenty of them willing to step up and take their place.
Well, that's why I say we need to go to the people that Kissinger's going to create this fear. Klaus Schwab's creating the same fear. Alan Dulles created the same fear before him, and offer them an alternative. Hey, you're the Italian royal family. Hey, don't worry. You're not going to end up like the Tsar of Russia. You don't need Alan Dulles anymore. We're going to help show you a way forward. And this is what Klaus Schwab tries to do with this, new agenda of just bullshit, and trust the Nazis. We did the death camps. We know how to do things efficiently. That's not a very good argument.
It's a great argument if people don't know the truth, and that's why last week in my absence I was telling people about that movie, that Francis Connolly movie, from JFK to 9/11. Everything is a rich man's trick. You know me, I'm the guy who's always beating the synthesis drum. Like, can you figure out a way to tell this story like from the beginning to the end? And I haven't gone and fact checked that movie yet, but what I like about it is it does kind of take us through the organization of these people that we refer to as Nazis all the time. Because, like I said, when I first met you and Task Force, and Task Force was talking about Nazis, and I was thinking, what do Nazis have to do with any of this? Well, it turns out that they have a lot to do with all of this stuff. So that synthesis is good. I don't know if I just took you off topic or not.
No, I think I do the same thing for now.
Yeah.
You hire Kolomoisky, Schwab or Kissinger or both. Hire Kolomoisky. You hire a mercenary army. You attack a part of a traditionally Russian area like the Donbass. You poke the bear continually. Well, first thing you got to do is overthrow a duly elected guy, Yanukovych, to then get your Nazi army, your brown shirts, your SS into the regular army. That was done in 2014. But then once you do that, then you have Kolomoisky just poke the bear until you get the response. And the response you want is an invasion. And then you can go to every country in the Eastern Europe and Western Europe and say, see, we told you Putin wanted to take over and recreate the old Soviet Union. That's why you need NATO, right? That's why you need NATO. That's why you need our new Russian gas line, our new gas line that'll subvert the Russians in the East Med pipeline. You need Kolomoisky's pipeline. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's the Hegelian dialectic. We'll poke that bear until you see the Russian bear. The Russian bear hadn't really done much. Donnie O'Sullivan kept saying, Carter Page and Papadopoulos are hacking, the Hillary Clinton's DNC server. Wait a minute, those guys are East Med pipeline guys. No, Donnie O'Sullivan, that doesn't work. The whole Russia was a lie. It was a hoax. Okay, and people weren't taking Russia seriously. They said, we got to hire Kolomoisky. We got to have a real army. We got to poke the bear. And they did. And now they're going to get a $750 billion for reconstruction. We said it was going to be exactly like World War II. The Bank of International Settlements was going to get all the Marshall Plan money, and it was all going to go to people who didn't deserve it. Isn't that exactly what's happening right now?
It is. And I have a video to run on that very subject. It just says processing right now. So I want to,
okay.
I'll stretch here and then.
Well, I'll go back to my.
Here it is. Here it is. It's 11 seconds, or 10
Great.
seconds, this video.
Okay, we'll watch it twice.
That's it. Wait, you muted, George.
Who is that?
That's Hegel.
Oh,
this
the
is
economist?
This is Hegel, the guy who came up with the Hegelian dialectic.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I'll play it one more time. This is the gangster version of Hegel. So this is the 21st century version of Hegel. Here we go.
That's pretty funny. That's really funny. Well, you might want to go to Kolomoisky. It might be quicker. It's step 1, hire Kolomoisky. Step 2, hire Azov. Step 3, poke the bear. Step 4, Russia invades. Step 5, get $750 billion. There was a movie called The Mouse That Roared, and the whole gist of the movie was, how do we piss off America so that we can get them to invade us, and then they'll rebuild us?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's the whole plan.
Right.
It's the mouse that roared. Kolomoisky is the mouse that roared.
And they actually sent an army to the United States in order to do battle with the Americans, and they were dressed, I think, as like 14th century knights or something.
And that was recreated on January 6th, right? I mean, it wasn't half the,
right, exactly.
Half the Kolomoisky's guys were on Capitol Hill. So yeah, I've tried that already. Yeah, it's amazing that this amount of money, 750 billion, is the Marshall Plan is a drop in the bucket compared. The Marshall Plan was under $1 billion, I think, and that created NATO. So I mean, you have to. And again, nothing against H.A. Goodman, but I choose to go to the Bank of International Settlements in Switzerland when they're doing the $750 billion deal. Because nobody was there in 1945 when Alan Dulles was doing that deal for the Marshall Plan, okay? I went there because nobody was there in 1945, H.A. Goodman, right? That's why we go to the places where the deals are done. So there you go.
Yep, and just, sidebar note, the NATO was founded in what is now known as the Andrew Mellon Auditorium, which is attached to what is the old Interstate Commerce Building in Washington, D.C., the back of the new EPA building. And on one end of the EPA building is a statue of Hermes that was pointed out to me on January 5th. On the other side of the building is Aphrodite, and if you put Hermes and Aphrodite together, then you get a hermaphrodite. And on the cornice of the building where NATO was founded in Washington, D.C., it was called the Interstate, I think it was called the Interstate Commerce Commission Building General Auditorium when it was created, but it's now called the Andrew Mellon Auditorium, is Columbia, the patron goddess of the United States of America. Why we have a patron goddess, I don't know. But she's rendered as a hermaphrodite. So just sidebar, weird NATO reference. So that building was built in 1930, but NATO was founded in that building. The first meeting where they agreed to terms was in that building, and they had their 50th anniversary in that building also.
And I would suggest that the seeds of the agreement where it was written out, not signed, but where it was written out, was actually in the old IG Farben headquarters in Frankfurt, which was Eisenhower used as the Allied command headquarters after World War II, and it was the seat of where the Americans ran the American sector. And a lot of people say, hey, wasn't there a Rothschild that used that building too? But it was IG Farben headquarters in Frankfurt, and it was, I think it's called Eisenhower Hall. And there, a lot of the NATO events in Europe happened there as well. But somebody had to get on the plane. You had to have a NATO courier get on the plane and take it over and get it signed in Washington, D.C. And I'm going to say that's McCloy. I'm pretty sure McCloy was the guy, but I could be wrong. But that was another guy who was one of these guys that trying to stab Kennedy in the back every time he turned around to, straighten his tie. And he was one of the guys who got all the Nuremberg Nazis off after the Nuremberg trial.
After they were found guilty.
After they were found guilty, shocked and all that. One thing about that video, I saw the first hour of it. So if you can't watch the whole 3 hours, watch the first hour.
Yeah.
It talked about George. I knew all about Prescott Bush and Union Bank and the Rockefellers and Harrimans and all that. I knew all that stuff. But one thing I found a surprise is Herbert Walker with the Silesian Steel Company, because Silesia again comes up with coronavirus with both Peter. I can't remember the guy's name now. It's so long in the news. But Silesia comes up in coronavirus. But anyway, they did the steel track going into Auschwitz.
Right.
Yeah. And that was Herbert Walker having slave plantation experience and how to move slaves around with the railroads was the kind of expertise.
Yeah, and they were Brown Brothers Harriman, and I'm trying to remember what the name of the English bank was that financed the South during the Civil War.
Brown Brothers.
What?
Brown Brothers. And Fleet Boston was a big one.
Well, no, I think Brown Brothers, I think that they actually at one point became insolvent, and Brown Brothers bought them or took over their bank. I can't remember.
Well, Brown Brothers went in the movie. It talks about this. Falls into the hands of a guy who ran Bank of England. I can't remember his name. So that was a surprise. And then Nixon hiring Ruby was another. Jack Rubenstein was another little bit of a surprise.
Right. And well, and it's interesting because Roger and I was comparing this narrative with Roger's narrative because Roger wrote a book on the JFK assassination. Where Roger doesn't come to the same conclusion that Francis Connolly comes to. Francis Connolly seems to be a lot more detailed, and Roger does say in the book that when Richard Nixon was sitting and watching Lee Harvey Oswald being brought out on television, and when Jack Ruby shot Lee Harvey Oswald. Oh no, I know what happened. I was having dinner with Roger, and Roger told me that who was the secretary, the attorney general?
Bobby Kennedy.
No, the attorney general for Nixon was.
Oh, Mitchell?
Mitchell. He told me that Roger told me that John Mitchell told him that he was sitting with Richard Nixon when Jack Ruby shot Jack Ruby shot Lee Harvey Oswald, and Nixon turned to John Mitchell and said, "I know that guy." And Mitchell said, "How do you know that guy?" And Nixon said, "He was introduced to me by Lyndon Johnson."
Yeah, that's a thread I wanted to follow. I wrote a couple of the Kennedy books, and Rubenstein actually was kind of a go-between for the Nazis. Believe it or not, everybody says he's Jewish and all that, but they had been bringing these guys into South America, Central America, and they were creeping north toward Mexico.
And that's something that I think the Nazis did, is that they changed their names to. I think Mengele changed his name to Greenbaum.
Yeah, yeah. And the island nations were also being used, Belize and then of course Cuba. They were being brought in by submarine by this Maria Lorenz's father, as a U-boat captain. Anyway, Ruby was the key guy in putting these Nazi guys into the businesses like LTV, like NASA, NASA Michaud, which was down in New Orleans, but then Houston Control. I mean, it ended up Nazi Control. I mean, Lyndon Johnson put so many of these ex-Nazi guys in. The guy who ended up running the Nazi wonder weapons at the end of the war, Kammler, the fair-haired boy of Hitler, ended up becoming a lecturer at NASA. Of course, Werner von Braun and all his underlings end up going there. So Ruby has been downplayed in history. He was working for Sam Giancana as this kind of go-between person, putting round pegs in round holes, hopefully, and square pegs in square holes, going all the way back as a gun runner to 1946, 47. And Nixon was the guy who was fighting the McDuffs of the world, if you remember. Nixon was the guy who was getting these guys clearances.
Right.
He was the guy putting these Nazis into places like the key defense.
Well, one of Connolly's claims is that Nixon was hired by, I want to say Dulles. I have to go watch it again. But basically, Nixon answered an ad in California that they were looking for somebody that they wanted to run as a politician, and he answered the ad.
Well, I think poor Dick Nixon didn't realize his father on that apple or orange orchard was sitting on an incredible amount of oil. So they lured him away. I think maybe they stuffed his mailbox with 50 ads to make sure he got it.
Right.
But they lured his father away, who had this general store, this Quaker general store, away from this orchard that they had. And, he never really got over that. Nixon never got over the fact that he used to tell that story over and over. I sold my land. We sold our land before they discovered oil on it. That was a chip that he always carried on his shoulder. But
Right.
I do agree with you. He was ready to sell out at any price to get to power. And Roger Stone, in his book, throws it all on LBJ and all the war contractors and the F1. Is it the F-111?
Maybe the swing wing.
The Ken Hale and all the Hales and all the murder, IB Hale and all the murder around that. There comes LTV, all the Vought Missile Corporation and all that sort of. It's the aviation guys that LBJ brought in to Texas.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, but getting back to Brown Brothers Harriman and Herbert Walker, it's funny because Prescott Bush's son's name was George Herbert Walker Bush, and so it's easy to remember Prescott Bush and Herbert Walker, because if you know George Herbert Walker Bush, then you know the names of his father's Nazi business partner, and then George W. Bush is George Walker Bush. So.
Yeah,
you got three generations of, obviously a very close relationship between the Walker family and the Bush family.
Yeah, I think the St. Louis Herbert Walker guy who put George Prescott Bush into Union Bank, so he was kind of the one who was doing the cotton trading and doing the railroads with Harriman and stuff. He was the kind of the precursor, the older uncle, and then Prescott was kind of the understudy for George Herbert Walker. But yeah, we got the idea here is the elites want to stay in power, and how do they do that? Fear. Macduff talks about this. There was a book that was given to his father called Terror, and it was how the Nazis got to power. It's just they created terror all along the way. Create the nuclear threat, create the biological threat, create the dirty bomb threat, create just threat. Nuclear threat initiative started by Ted Turner and Donald Rumsfeld was based on that. How do we control politicians? We always have to have threats available and ready to be dropped on them at a moment's notice.
Right. And to me, that's the unsaid thing about Auschwitz too, is that people talk about the horrible things that happened there, but the human impact of horror is something that I think that the Germans were productizing, and they were trying to figure out how to package it. I don't think that they were, I don't think that the killing was mindless. I believe that the terror was mindful, and that there was all kinds of things, programs that were probably being instituted around. You create this situation where you're doing these unspeakable things to human beings. Well, the human beings that are surviving are living with this kind of legacy of terror that's been applied to them. And then once that terror has been applied to them, there's all kinds of ways that you can utilize those people, be it Manchurian candidates or, who knows? I mean, maybe George Soros is a direct product of that kind of processing, right? And the Germans were doing this on an industrial scale. And so that's why I think things like Holocaust denial are illegal in certain countries, is because they don't want people kicking around the edges and looking under the carpet, as it were, to see what else was actually really going on there.
Yeah, it's a very sad topic, the MK Ultra and whatnot, and so I'll duck that one. I see a very interesting comment by Dave Underdown talking about Fokker Aviation. Don't get me started on these Fokkers, because the Fokker Aviation becomes Lockheed. Lockheed goes almost out of business in 1970. Who comes in to save them? The U.S. government, right? So there's a lot to be said.
Well, the Focke-Wulf 190 was nothing to be sneezed at. I think that ultimately the only reason that they didn't dominate the Mustangs was just because of their ability to get tetraethyl lead.
Yeah, the Gibson Island, and Bill Taylor covers that tetraethyl lead, and Rockefeller's getting tetraethyl lead to them, and there would have been no Nazi war machine, no Blitzkrieg without tetraethyl lead, no Goering Luftwaffe. So that's a great story as far as war secrets are concerned. But getting back to the Silesia Brigade and Peter Daszak's father, who was in the Silesia Brigade and may have worked at Auschwitz or many Auschwitzes. Remember, I.G. Farben comes up with Zyklon B. Okay, remember, they're doing experiments on people, not killing them. They're testing the limits of how cold can water be before you die, how little oxygen do you have before you lose consciousness. They're doing all these experiments, these aviation experiments, at places like Dachau and Auschwitz. And then only at the end, the final solution with your guy, everybody says Heydrich, came up with it in whatever, 39 or 37. It was a proposal until then.
Right.
But it didn't really go into the Mercedes furnaces and stuff. That was more of a sanitary thing. Right. And then the mass.
Right, that was cleaning up biohazard waste because they're using bioweapons to. Nobody's saying that no one got murdered. People were getting murdered all over the place, but they weren't being murdered in the ways that people talk about, and they needed to clean up the biohazard waste.
Yeah, and I.G. Farben, these files, the Silesia connection to George Walker was the thing that came out to me. It's like, oh my gosh. Because what they are talking about is the war is never over. The war is only over with these Soviets for the dead. This war is not over the Pale, which was the area between Germany and going down to the Black Sea, between the North Sea and the Black Sea, was this huge swath of land that was supposedly given by Catherine the Great. And now the Victoria Newlands and the Freelands of the world from Canada have talked themselves into that's NATO's buffer zone against Russia. That's
beyond. So that's where, is that where the expression "beyond the pale" comes from?
That's where the expression "beyond the pale" comes from, because Catherine the Great said Jews can trade freely in the Pale. Okay, so Catherine the Great wanted to make Odessa the Novorossiysk, the new Russia, right? So this,
and Zelensky was talking about that in Israel, right? When he went to Israel.
Yeah, well, he's talking about the Victoria Newland. Hey, the Pale is going to be the new buffer zone against Russia, and that's going to be the bio zone. That's where we're going to do the bio. So this bio thing's been going on. Fort Detrick had it until 73 or 69 with Nixon. Oops, I lost you, Peter, I think.
I had to cough.
Oh, you had to cough. Okay. But then it got moved to various partners in Europe after that. But this bio thing, as a bio buffer against Russia, has been going on a long time. And again, who did the Pietro Benassis go to? They don't go to the European Parliament members. They're going to be here one week and gone the next. They go to people like, your gal that you stayed with, who's the Duchess of, of Reggio Emilia or Bologna.
Bologna.
Yeah, they go to those people.
Right.
And they say, hey, you remember what happened to Tsar Nicholas? We're going to keep that all from happening. We're going to use this Pale as a bio buffer zone. Here comes Putin. You have to support this. You have to fund this. Yeah, we're going to use European Space Agency money. And all the EU money. I mean, I was at the reactor for CERN Super Collider for a month, like standing over it, right? It's like huge. It goes into France and Geneva. They finally fired it up on the last day. It's been dead for 10 years, right?
Right.
Why do they fire it up? Because they want to show that all that money didn't get wasted. It's a conspiracy theorist here saying these big super projects are funding this bio buffer to Russia. We're going to fire up the.
Are you saying that CERN might be a black hole?
If you look at it from a map, it's a black hole.
Just from a financial standpoint, it's a black hole.
Yes, it is. And
so that's the joke, right? They're trying to create a black hole at CERN. It has nothing to do with physics.
They did. And they turned it on. What did they turn it on for an hour? And if you look at the just who the people are in control, they are over and over again. It's this NATO fear. Putin's going to invade. We can't blow up your cities, right? Nukes are not going to work. This is what a conversation behind the scenes. The only way we can stop them is bios. And there's going to be a swath. The Jewish Pale is going to be the swath that we have to have. Plus, they want the new land. They want the free land, which is where all the Nazis went to after World War II, Odessa. And that
the Odessa network, right?
In their mind, that's how it is. Look at every small nation that was created after World War II. I don't care how small. They had a Waffen-SS division. You go through every nation, they all had Waffen-SS. 14th Waffen-SS, 1st Panzer in Ukraine, but Bosnia had one, Herzegovina. Remember those two different nations. Bosnia had one, Herzegovina had one.
Weren't these also the kind of the backbone of Gladio?
Yes, they were the backbone of Gladio. A lot of people look to the financing from the Vatican and through insurance companies like Lino Benassi as financing Gladio, and a close relationship with William Colby when he was doing the whole Gladio thing. So this is their mentality, that this is going to be the bio buffer. And so one of the things that I believe they're doing under the table is decapitation strikes on Russian generals. Look at the number. It's like 14 times higher than any other war, in history, right? Where that's many generals. You have to go back to Napoleonic wars, where actually the emperor was there.
Where the generals were actually on the field.
Yeah, you have to go back to the Napoleonic wars to see this kind of general attrition. And the only thing could be is the generals didn't think that the Ukrainians had that capability. And now they realize, oops, they do have that capability.
Well, the Ukrainians don't, though. NATO does.
NATO does. Yes, NATO
Yeah.
does. But what I'm saying is the places you think are going to be the ones that are going to be firing at you if you're the Russian general, it's the Black Swan event that gets you. It's the thing that comes out of a Club K that your guys aren't watching in, as far as the satellite goes, and it's on the move. And the HIMARS is interesting because it's a wheeled vehicle. It's not like the bigger 275, which is a treaded vehicle. So you fire, and then you can move out at 60 miles an hour, right? So I think that there in this group of missiles that they've been talking about, they've mixed in, I looked at this company called Nexstar, Nextar, I guess, in Bourge, Bourge. They have
not NETSAR, Nexstar. No,
not that one. It could be a guided munition.
Yeah.
This is guided munitions of 155 millimeter. That also could account for this pinpoint accuracy, 6 foot deviation accuracy. So it could be your theory, which is, it's the 155 millimeter. It's not the missile. I'm leaving that open. But something has to explain how they're getting these numbers. And I say it's going to be, before it was SpaceX, no offense, Max Manassi, and now it looks like Hubble. It really does. And no offense, Joe Manassi. But
because of the resolution?
The resolution, yeah. I can read epaulets. I can read and remember also there's metadata around a general. General's going to have 4 or 5
vehicles. Yeah.
Yeah, and all that. So it's not always just reading epaulets, but I can do facial recognition with some of these things. Remember the keyhole satellite, the bus-sized satellite that Richard Bissell was doing? That's 70 years ago, right? And they were talking about reading license plates in the 70s.
Right.
Right. So facial recognition would be the odds-on thing, and it's very, very disturbing to a young Russian soldier to see his general killed. Americans and Russians will only fight. They'll never fight for anybody's profits. Americans and Russians, they say it in the film, will only fight for patriotism.
Right.
You have to provide big bad wolf, and they'll never fight for an industrialist.
Yeah, Leo Strauss. You have to have a bad guy. Yeah, there has to be a black hat.
So anyway, somehow these 3 Benassis or 4 Benassis got rolled into a story that I had said that they were somehow started Corona, and there's this Russian blood program, and they were targeting Russian blood, which I didn't say any of that.
Yeah. So what's going on with CNN? Because CNN
that's what
you're
the
talking
same
about,
thing.
right?
CNN trolls created this misinformation, but CNN did the first thing. If you remember, I go to a State Department source, Chinese Foreign Ministry. It's brought to me by a White House reporter, and they say the State Department delegation, or the delegation of U.S. athletes, the delegation inside the U.S. athletes, brought it. We did a research on all athletes. We only found 1 State Department athlete. The person did look like they suffered from the effects, and they had been to China in 2016 and 2017, or their devices had been to China in 2016. So the husband could have brought the devices. But that was enough for me to say this person was a victim, called her patient 0.
And how did you know that it was their devices that went?
IP addresses.
Okay.
And you basically use this kind of lookup capability where you that it's used in the legal professions, where you associate, like you say, you sleep every night
in the same place. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's how you associate.
Your device is anonymous, but it sleeps at the same address every night from 9 o'clock until 9 o'clock at night until 9 o'clock the next morning, 8 o'clock.
And so anyway, they're trying to say that I'm putting blame. I'm not putting blame. Patient 0 means victim. Now the Substack gets into, hey, we did uncover the smoking gun. The person who did the training, remember, in order to be the perpetrator now, we're leaving victims, we're moving into perpetrator. perpetrator has to, if arsonist, take an example, has to be to the site before the event happens. This person trained all the people at the Wuhan lab. There's opportunity right there, right?
Right.
This person got all the bids for coronavirus. That's motive. Okay? So you have to have motive and opportunity to play Clue in this game.
Means, motive, opportunity, right?
And they had the means because they had been to China before for a novel coronavirus in 2009. And I had the address, benassi@who.int. The person also we found was getting all the bids and had written the blueprint for what the expected viruses are going to be. They'd gotten all the hemorrhagic fever bids, not only for the WHO, which is publicly funded.
Which we haven't seen yet, right?
No, we haven't seen. Well, I've spent weeks trying to get those in Geneva. But then also for the Wellcome Trust, which has a long history in bioagents. So there's a lot of smoking guns here. And that's when you decide to go to the next level in investigation and look at other Benassi connections. That's the whole point of this article is, what was my smoking gun? It wasn't the victim. It wasn't declaring somebody a patient zero. Mm-hmm. It was finding Virginia Benassi and the smoking gun. That's what led me to go, hey, is there any Pietros? Is there anybody in in NATO? And it turned out there was like a whole list.
I don't remember who you were talking to, but it seems like this name keeps popping up so many times that it's almost like a wink, right? Like it's not even like a real name, it's a program.
Yeah, it's like an operative name. I think it's like everybody's a struck. Who would name their kid that? If we were, you know what I mean? Well, so I was told in Washington D.C. Again, you get these sidebar conversations that, hey, the Pope had actually, in an effort to do, like you're saying, Gladio, they had recognized this place in Poland, because that's where they're going to try with Solidarność and all that. They were going to recognize this place as the Eastern Orthodox capital of Europe. And the Pope was going to give some kind of special dispensation. And it just happened to be Peter Strzok's grandfather's hometown, just before they changed the name from Strzok, right? And they were going to promise him that the Pale used to be owned by these Prussian warlords. The same generals that were the World War I generals that hated Hitler because he was the stupid corporal from Bavarian Corporal, right? These are the same guys in World War I that ran the show. And
that's another thing that's very interesting about the Francis Connolly video is that his contention, and I've heard this before, but Connolly I think does a pretty good job of kind of laying it out, that Hitler was a construct, that they needed someone as a front man for all of these programs that they already had in place, and that the idea that he was this megalomaniacal, well, he might have been megalomaniacal, but the fact that there's always been, for example, the question. It's Hannah Arendt, I think, brought it up in Eichmann on Jerusalem, and people have always questioned whether or not Hitler, quote unquote, knew about the final solution, because they don't have any paperwork. There isn't an order signed. There isn't any of that stuff. And if you follow Connolly's logic, who watching this video right now believes that Joseph Biden is actually in control of the government? So imagine you had some kind of so jump back one president to Donald Trump, who actually believes that Donald Trump was in charge of the government. I mean, he tried to wrestle it, but, it's like, a kindergartner wrestling a grizzly bear. Like, you want the kindergartner to win because you love kindergartners, but,
That's a good analogy.
But
I would maybe give him like a 13-year-old with a pocket knife. But
okay, a 13-year-old with a pocket knife against the grizzly bears. It's not going to end well, right? So,
yeah.
I think Connolly does a pretty good job of kind of laying out this case that Hitler was about as in control of the Third Reich as Trump was in control of the United States government.
Yeah, I mean, if you look back to World War I, a lot of the Prussian officer corps These are the guys who had all the battle dueling scars on their thing, and
The Vaughns,
yeah,
the Junkers,
the
right?
Junkers, the young
Yeah.
princes, the young prince. These were the guys who really considered themselves the intelligentsia because they were a combination of two things. They were a combination of people who had proven themselves on the battlefield through courage, and also they were elites. They were dukes in the old Germany, and they were the ones that were going to be the new leaders into the new generation. And Connolly does a good job of saying, hey, Hitler was kind of a, well, you know, we need a guy with a couple iron crosses around here because we actually all were in chateaus in France, and none of us
Right.
have any battle scars and machine gun bullets, and none of us were blinded by chemical attacks. So we need somebody who the people kind of respond to, and we probably need a Bavarian to carry Bavaria. And so then this whole thing with the Munich beer push and everything else, Alan Dulles, right? I mean, Alan Dulles worked for Fritz Thyssen. Everybody knows that story, you know, the whole Fritz Thyssen, you know, and
I don't know that story.
oh well, Fritz Thyssen was owned 3/4 of the steel in Germany,
And Dulles was his attorney.
yes,
Yeah.
and he built the Bismarck, and he had this bank in Rotterdam that was the bank for the Shell Oil, and they were basically the gasoline station for Hitler's war machine during the whole war. And Fritz Thyssen, 39 Broadway, the film talks about it, had George Bush and George Walker was at that location, and Union Bank and Prescott Bush. That was the U.S. address, 39 Broadway, for Fritz Thyssen. But Thyssen elevators, you'll see Thyssen elevators. It looks like Thyssen.
Right.
But that was the war machine, and those industrialists, like the film says, bet on both sides.
Right.
They're not going to.
Well, they bet on all sides because there's more than two sides. They bet on they bet on the New Deal. They bet on the Soviet Union. They bet on the Third Reich. They have chips on all over the table.
Yeah, and you're doing the film on Heydrich, or the play on Heydrich. I think it was cleanup on aisle 7. I think Himmler went and blew off the dust on the Heydrich plan. Heydrich, remember, really was starting off with the gasoline, the poisoning, them monoxide.
Yeah, the carbon monoxide vans, right?
Yeah. And this was really, hey, that's not going to help in a biological cleanup situation. Burning is the only thing you can do. So I think that's where you start getting into the, hey, we got to clean up on aisle 7 here, because you guys are all going to be going to a war crimes trial if anybody finds out about what happened here.
Well, not only that, when you're dealing with bioweapons, you need to the cleanup on aisle 7 winds up becoming a population saving thing. You don't want that thing leaking, right?
Right.
It's not just about burning the evidence; it's about sterilizing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And IG Farben ran that facility. I went through it on my trip through Poland, and so there is a lot to be said for, hey, if we want any money, if we want to get the cash, and we don't want to hang in Nuremberg, we got to kind of clean this thing up. I think the problem got into the race, where they couldn't control the events at the end, where the Soviets were coming so fast that they had to advance Patton in there and get to it before the Soviets had the proof. And so that didn't work out well, because I think they would have preferred, Alan Dulles would have preferred, and all the bankers and industrialists would have preferred to never have any of that come to light.
Right.
I think it was Patton really that pissed him off and, brought a lot of that stuff to light.
Well, we know what happened to him.
Yeah. Well, the cart, in the movie Patton, they do a good job of showing how he almost got killed by a cart. And then, of course, he dies 6 months later from an auto accident. But I think this is such a good model for what's happening right now. Only you get to see it in real time. Took 5 years. Yeah.
Fun times, George.
Yeah. Well, there is a way to win. That's the beauty of this, is you have to figure out who is the Alan Dulles. Who is the guy controlling everybody with the fear? It's only one guy. It's Kissinger. A little bit with Klaus if Kissinger dies.
But do you think that, how old is Kissinger now?
97, I think.
Like, is he really in charge?
Yeah. Klaus picks up the phone on the first ring when Henry calls.
All
Guaranteed.
Right.
Yeah. But my point is use, it's the same game. Hire an ultra nationalist guy who is going to go create a big hornet's nest that's going to make America throw money at Europe. And you gotta, they took, God, that's why they hated Charles Lindbergh so much with America First. America's got to get in the war, and they had to do Pearl Harbor eventually to finally get America across the dime, because everybody remembered the First World War. The whole thing is trigger the American money, trigger the American money. And if you look at World War II with the Marshall Plan money, who got the money? Again, no offense to H.A. Goodman, but George Webb was in Basel at the Bank of International Settlements when the proposal went down for the $750 billion. That's who got the money. There you go, Tower Basel. That's who got the money in 45. That's what created NATO, the Marshall Plan.
Right. That's Nazi gold there. Yeah, I mean, I look. It's funny because I was watching Kelly's Heroes the other night too, and I think I look at all of these, like Clint Eastwood. I think seems to be like somebody who creates cover stories, right? Like that movie is about how the Americans, with the help of a few Germans, took all of that gold that was the Nazi gold. That the Americans took it. Yeah, I don't think so.
Well, that's partially true because the vaults in Basel, I showed the train station. You had to get the gold to the train station. American soldiers did load it. Same thing happened with Saddam Hussein, and same thing.
Well, that's I guess that's the end of the movie. They don't show you. They don't show you the Americans and the Germans driving all of the gold off to Basel or to the train station to send it off to Basel. You think that they're going to go home and they're going to buy a speedboat.
Yeah, Kolomoisky's sitting there with a clipboard. Okay, there's double eagle 1, double eagle 2, double eagle 3. We're missing a double eagle. Everybody's going to jail. So that is, the whole thing has been sped up super fast for you right now in Ukraine. Hire Kolomoisky, hire Azov, poke the bear, first take over, overthrow Ukraine, get the $750 billion. Boom, it all happened in like 3 months. So you got World War II all in 3 months. And I produced the slide where they showed how the mining interests and everything were going to be divided amongst the NATO nations from the meeting. They had a little sub-meeting in Lugano at the other end to try to be a throw that Basel wasn't in control of this thing. But the $750 billion is coming fast. This is reconstruction money. You and I talked about a guy who ran Mint Press that was diverting reconstruction money in Iraq, starting Mint Press in Michigan. Or in Minnesota.
I don't know if I heard that story.
Oh, there's this guy named Muhawesh who had Middle East trading, and he was one of the people who got a ton of money for Iraq reconstruction money, and with that money in Minnesota, he started Mint Press. Wait a minute, Minnesota's in in the green zone? What?
Right. Well, it's interesting because people ask me about. I have Mint Press on the Duke Report, for example, because Mint Press does some good reporting. Likewise, Max Blumenthal, Sidney Blumenthal's son. Okay.
White helmet.
He does some good reporting. Why do I have him up there? Because the tagline on the Duke Report is all news is made up. Some of it is true. So, like, if they're reporting good stuff, Caitlin Johnstone usually has really good stuff. Sometimes not. You gotta just kind of be discerning in the news. But I think that if I bring it all together in one place, then people can try to sort it out for themselves.
Yeah, I love the Duke Report, obviously, and I love the breadth of no favorites played. Here it all is, and let the reader beware and reader discern. Right, which is really great.
I didn't make the idea up when I heard Arianna Huffington interviewed before the Huffington Report ever launched, and the idea that she pitched, and I think it might have been on the Bill Maher show or something like that, was that she wanted to build an outlet that had both sides of every issue. Now, of course,
Andrew Breitbart started for Ariana Huffington.
Andrew Breitbart was one of the original editors of Drudge, and he left Drudge and he went to work for Ariana Huffington because she said that she was going to start this outlet where she was going to play both sides, and she wanted Andrew kind of like to be the mediator on that. But I think he left because he found out very quickly that that's not what the Huffington Post turned into. So I don't buy the dialectic game, though. I don't buy the left-right paradigm anymore. I believe that different people. I mean, my taxonomy of the world, and I was talking to Stu Peters about this last weekend, is that, I think every kind of center of power has their own intelligence service, right? We like to think of governments being the centers of power, right? There's the American intelligence service, and there's the Russian intelligence service, and there's the British intelligence service, the Chinese intelligence service. But no, the Bank of International Services, they have an intelligence service. Wells Fargo has an intelligence service. Lockheed Martin has an intelligence service. Like there's all of these powerful, I call them power centers. They all have intelligence services, and part of intelligence is doing counterintelligence, and part of counterintelligence is doing information dissemination, right? So you've got all of these things going on. So I don't play the. Yeah, go on.
What's the law? The internet law, the power of networks. I think it's like a Moore's law for networks. But the value of a network increases as you add participants.
Yeah, the network effect. Yeah,
the network effect, and that's true for intelligence agencies. The Five Eyes formed right after World War II, quickly went to the Nine Eyes, quickly went to the 13 Eyes. And again, U.S. and British lead that group. It throw Israel in there as the 14th eye, and maybe the most powerful or the biggest eye of the group. But definitely that the oil interest, BP is a driver. Well,
BP has an intelligence division.
Yeah. I mean, Rahm Emanuel is out there talking about BP, the green company. I mean, you want to see Hitler,
BP changed all of their branding to green. It's green, and it's got a leaf, and the BP is in a leaf, like a plant. It's like
Hitler is a baby swaddler, kindergarten school. I mean, that's the repackaging of BP as a carbon neutral thing. What is then Apple, George? Google. What is that?
Apple and Google are intelligence companies. Okay, like they sell themselves as Again, here's the rule of thumb: if they're not charging you for the product, you are the product. Okay, so if Google is giving you something for free, that's because Google is selling your ass to someone else, the highest bidder, usually, and that's usually some intelligence service that has a lot of money.
Well, I mean, if you look at Google, Joey Benassi now works for Google in Madison, Wisconsin. But when you look at Keyhole and then giving that out and pushing that out to the public sector, you do it through somebody who's got some market presence like Google. Because what do you want? You want social media annotation of maps. You can't hire every analyst in the world. You want the annotation. You can always layer out the stuff you don't want, right? You want the pictures from every location. And whoever came up with that idea, and I think it was
it started with Foursquare.
I actually think it was that one creepy guy that worked with Chertoff that came up with the concept. I can't remember his name right now. But the idea of using people to do your annotation and intelligence collection is a brilliant idea because you're leveraging the internet. It's a brilliant idea.
Well, and it's funny because Facebook is called Facebook, and people are all like bent out of shape about Clearview. Clearview, the secret sauce of Clearview is that they've collected more faces. They've scraped more faces off the internet than any other company. But their technology isn't better than Facebook's. Their technology, because they're using Facebook's technology. They're using APIs like Facebook and Google and other companies that have facial recognition API. Their secret sauce is that they've scraped all these databases. Well, I can tell you for sure, I know this, as sure as I'm sitting here. May God strike me dead. Okay, Facebook has a lot more pictures than Clearview. Okay, Google has a lot more pictures than Clearview, and they have that stuff, and they don't make it available to anyone. They keep it internal.
Yeah, the proprietary algorithms are the only thing they have, if you think about it. And they're people, I guess, but the people can walk out the door and, drive away in their Ferrari anytime they want, But the Apple, I think to a lesser degree, I mean, Jobs didn't want that to be Apple's role.
Which was why I think his death is highly suspect.
It is because, I mean, the guy who came in, Tim Cook, I mean, he ended up basically taking the product plans for Apple over the next 5 years that he had, and then just said, hey, why don't we stretch this out to 20? Nobody's going to know Steve's dead for, that all this was Steve stuff because he's dead. So let's stretch this out for 20 years.
Right.
If you look at it now,
and then his wife, Lorene, buys the Atlantic, and the Atlantic becomes like, the official voice for, the globalists.
Yeah, the thing with his wife, I did a lot of research looking for Lisa and trying to interview Lisa, the daughter, and she just doesn't. And I looked for the father in San Jose at this restaurant and stuff, and they're done with it. They're just like, okay, we got used, and this is a bad story, and it's not going to turn out good for us because there's just so many people that are just.
Well, it's like being a Kennedy. You know what happens if you become too effective.
Right. Yeah. Things don't go well. So that's the Substack. I'm sure I'm not at the top of the Duke report yet, but when Peter reads it, it's gonna zoom to the top. I didn't kill any Russians, or I didn't kill anybody who worked for NASA because I said there was a Russian blood program. I never connected. I did make one point. None of the Nazi Benassis I ever connected with the Russian program. I did make one point, though, that this Enrico Benassi worked on a quantum dots program or nanodots program. And the idea is very small particles that you absorb that when I shine a light on you, this is the idea of surveillance, like a tattoo, that you light up. We use that with a green phosphorescent protein in biology all the time. Right? We use that in the new mRNA.
Don't they call that luciferase?
Luciferase, yeah. Yep.
Luciferase.
And the same idea goes for lighting up DNA. I can take anything the natural body has created. Okay? There's 4 building blocks for.
You're at the top of the Duke report, George.
Oh, I love it. See if I hammer long enough. And anyway, you have only 4 letters in the alphabet. One of them in mRNA is the U, for uracil. If I come up with a fake uracil, anything your body makes using messenger RNA, and everything that you are is made through mRNA. Everything. Every protein in your body is made through mRNA. If I take everything the body makes in those 4 letters and I literally copyright the U, I own everything. I substitute. This is the whole mRNA thing.
Right.
The vaccine.
Intellectual property.
Yeah, I own everything. I mean, there's Richard Rothschild does get the patent in 2015.
Black's Law.
He does get the patent to test in 2015 for coronavirus. How did he know? So, but I'm just saying that this is where it's going. This isn't just about vaccination. This is about intellectual property. It always has been.
Yep.
Otherwise, they wouldn't have come up with an art. Can we see the Duke report? I just want to see that I didn't kill the Russian generals.
I have to refresh the page, and whenever I move a widget, then it takes a few seconds. So I'm refreshing the page. So keep talking, and when it's there, I'll bring it up.
I'm just saying that this is the new tactic. The whole level of sophistication patrols. It's not just saying I hate George Webb. It's not just saying George Webb doesn't know what he's talking about. He made everything up. Not just that anymore. It's now taking the great work I've done by going there and doing the research, and then spinning their own theory that's totally wild and wacky that covers what they're really doing. They're really killing Russian generals through some kind of over-the-horizon capability. And now they're connecting the people that I've reported on with killing people over the horizon. And now they're saying it's Russian blood targeting. Now, I'm not saying, look at that, Peter. Where am I?
Buy me a coffee.
under Buy Me a Coffee. Oh, there I am. I'm at the top of Buy Me a Coffee. Please buy Peter a coffee for moving him to the top. Please. But Peter, I'll end with this: that there is a Russian blood program. I'm not saying there isn't. I think the idea is they sort of gave up on trying to read the DNA because Ukrainians are so damn close to Russians. It's so much intermingling.
Well, I mean, yeah, and Stu Peters showed me a video that he did, kind of an overview. I think it's the introduction that he did to Laura Logan called "Empire of Lies," where he's talking about the kind of Stu Peters is really good at one thing, and I think that George, there's something to be learned from him, and that's synthesis. He takes big, complicated stories. He's very good at kind of like, putting a box and wrapping it up with a ribbon and a bow, and he does a really good job of kind of breaking down that situation. But keep going. Sorry.
Well, this is longer format. I try to do that in my 2-minute bits on I think it's Richard Rothschild. It might be a different Rothschild that got the patent for coronavirus for the testing dipstick for coronavirus in 2015. I think it's Richard Rothschild. But my what is this? You're not good enough. That's who's really at the top.
Well, that's in the picture on the top. Yeah. This is what's his name? Computing Forever. This is an Irish guy who does commentary, and he's talking about what the essence of transhumanism, where it comes from, and why all of this trans stuff is happening. It's kind of building. It's building us towards being transsexual is building towards people getting used to the idea that if you don't feel good enough in the body that you have, well, if you're a man, you can become a woman. Well, the next step is if you're a human, you can become a machine.
That's bad choice. Bad choices.
Yes, agreed.
So Peter, what if I know that every May Day, okay, all the Russian generals are going to come out with all their medals, and they're going to be at Moscow Square, and they're going to be breathing the air, watching their missile carriers go by. Wouldn't that be a good time to put out a special Russian general quantum dot, right? If I could then shine some type of energy wave that hit those absorptive characteristics, couldn't I tell the difference between a Russian general and a Russian colonel? I don't know, but nanodots and quantum dots have been used in the chase for terrorists for over 30 years, going back almost 40 years, ever since 9/11 for sure. And getting terrorists out of the cave has been the number one objective of bioagents. Bioagents to hit the grass, catch her in the rye, poison the food that the animals eat, poison the animals, or poison them to get them to come out of the caves. But get stuff in their blood that then I can later light up. And isn't it great that these Russian generals don't wear these beautiful Duke Report T-shirts? That would be a much.
You mentioned May Day.
Yes, I did.
And it just reminded me that we have a May Day T-shirt.
I love it.
On the Duke Report. Now I know that flag etiquette is very important, and I designed this thing kind of without thinking about it too much. But when you turn the flag upside down, which way do the stars go? Or does it matter? Because you're just saying, hey, I'm in trouble here.
Well, is that the international symbol for May Day, is to fly the American flag upside down? I thought it was to fly a red flag or something.
Well, the American symbol for May Day is to take your flag and turn it upside down. It's the distress flag.
Oh, I did not know that.
Anyway.
Huh. Well,
and of course, the Russians would love on May Day to see your flag upside down.
Yes.
Yes.
Huh. Well, I'm just saying, if you want to kill Russian generals, don't spray Belgorod during a Borscht festival, right? You're not going to get any nanodots in any Russian general's blood. You're
right.
40 right. You might get some old, Russian women and stuff. Not the place you want to use your nanodots.
Oh, I know what Stu was talking about. I'm sorry, I spurred out. I went into a subroutine and then I got lost. He was talking about the history of Ukraine and how Ukraine was basically colonized by the Russians, for lack of another word, like 300 years ago. Like there wasn't anybody there, and the Russians went in, especially in the eastern part of it, and they settled it, and they built farms, and they built it up. That there wasn't anybody there, and that the country of Ukraine wasn't actually even a country until the Soviet Union was created, and they started drawing all these lines. So kind of like Iraq is a made-up country because the Sykes-Picot Agreement created it as a country. The Soviets made up Ukraine as a country. It wasn't really a country before the Soviet Union happened.
That's true, and I think the Black Sea, has had a long history of being a trade route. I think the Junkers and had thought of Odessa as their port. When Peter Duke has the meetings, the Prussian Friends of Prussia meeting, that's their port in their head.
You mean Peter Thiel, not Peter Duke?
I met Peter Strzok.
Peter Strzok.
I met Peter Strzok when they have
not Peter Thiel, not Peter Duke. Peter Strzok.
Peter Strzok when they have their Friends of Prussia, hand-holding meetings. Odessa, that's where Reinhard Gehlen ended up. Was in Odessa.
Right.
So that's why I'm waiting for Putin to
via Geneva and Arlington. Right. He went from Geneva to Arlington and then back to Odessa. Right. Yeah.
Well, first he had to become the leader of the German intelligence, the BDR. So that was interesting. Hey, you went from being the head of the Abwehr in Nazi Germany, and now you're the head of NATO intelligence, or the biggest nation in NATO at that time. That's odd. So anyway,
right. It's kind of like you went from shooting missiles at London to hanging out with Walt Disney.
There's another great. I want to touch on the Georgia Guidestones. Finally got blown up.
Yeah.
You lived near a Rockwell thrust tester for rockets. You saw the
Rocketdyne. It's actually a brownfield. Yes.
Yeah, and that's what they had, and that's what von Braun wanted to do. He wanted the Saturn V to be a secret project because he said, "Hey, this is what I was working on at the end of the war. I wanted to hit New York with this thing." Okay, that was the plan. Okay, they called it I can't remember what rocket. Anyway, the America rocket or whatever. But that was the plan.
So it's just a coincidence that it's 666.66 miles from the UN.
What is
the Georgia Guidestones? That was something I saw yesterday. I don't know if it's true.
I don't think that's true. I don't think that's more than that. It's more than that. But anyway, what do you do after von Braun dies in '87? It's like, hey, you know what? We never did make that the secret rocket facility, to test. What you do is you basically turn a Saturn V over and then you put it on big tension wires and then you fire the rockets and see how much thrust they create. That's the only way you can test the thrust. So they fill the damn thing in with dirt and concrete. Well, what do you do now? Wait for George Webb to come along and go, hey, this looks like the thrust tester for Werner von Braun. No, you put the Georgia Guidestones there and make sure that it's a monument.
Well, both things could be true.
I think they're both true.
Yeah.
They put the Georgia Guidestones there as sort of an honorific to von Braun. I live in Georgia. So, and now everyone's saying, over the horizon radar, Virginia Benassi, Pietro Benassi. I don't know what happened, but while I was in Europe, they decided to blow up the Georgia Guidestones with the 500 million thing and all that. So I think that conspiracy theory that it was going to be the New World Orders, marching orders, and that we're going to reduce the population.
It's literally a cover story.
Yeah, it's a cover story for the Saturn V development. And Kennedy said, no damn way. We're going to do it at Redstone. Redstone, if you go from the Georgia Guidestones straight over the Alabama border, they wanted to make sure it was outside of Georgia, outside of von Braun's control. Boom, it's right there. That's where the development of the Redstone is. Von Braun's argument was, hey, we're a lot closer to Cape Canaveral. Noi Peenemünde is what he called it, where the Peenemünde was where the V1 and V2 were developed. It's a lot closer to Noi Peenemünde, and we'll be in control of it. It'll just be Nazis. We won't have to worry about any of those American guys over there at Redstone. It'll just be a new Nazi thing. And Kennedy said no. So, I mean, I might go to the Georgia Guidestones and get LiDAR and show you, why is there a 300-foot concrete cylinder below these two things?
Well, okay, George.
I think I might.
They knocked the monument down, so my guess is nobody will care if you go there with your LiDAR right now.
I wonder if it's fenced off or not, but
there's not much to do there.
There's nothing. There's nothing to do there. The only other thing that's close by, and this is, again, if you look at the Nazis when they came to the United States, is have a university close by. You got to have math and science students still for this stuff. And the University of Georgia is right by there. Athens is right by there, and that's where you get your talent. Somebody watching this episode here found a whole bunch of bioscientific stuff, or was familiar with a golf course here in Atlanta that they excavated, and it had all of Von Braun's scientific gizmo stuff. The same thing that David Ferry had in Louisiana. Every scientific gizmo and not in space, biology.
Right.
He was thinking payload. His job is to provide the platform. The other Nazis, the bio-Nazis like Mengele and stuff, were supposed to provide the payload. If I can get a rocket to to London, you need to put something in the rocket that's going to scare the bejesus out of everybody in London to make them sue for peace. That's
right. And if you can't make the nuclear weapon work, which Mark claims they never did, then you got to do something else, right?
And the bio was the way that they were trying to do it at the end. And they were ahead of us in bio. And look at all the stuff that came out of the key guys, Eric Traub and Blom, who came to Fort Detrick, came and ran our program. Look at all their stuff that they were working on.
Kurt Bloma.
Yeah, they were using and testing on the Jews. Look at how all that broke out in Africa after what's-his-face's, the guy who ran IG Farben, his son went to Congo. And then all of a sudden these hemorrhagic fevers had never before been seen in Africa. Now they're popping up everywhere. Monkey virus and, Zika. You just can't believe it. I'm trying to remember the guy's name, not Skorzeny, but the banker for Hitler that ran IG Farben, Fourth Reich. Rise of the Fourth Reich, Jim Mars.
I had his picture pulled up here on the video. Somebody, come on, Dave Underdown.
But his son went to Congo after the war, and then we had the breakout of all the Nazi refrigerator stuff in one after another. Marburg, Congo, Crimea, hemorrhagic fever, Ebola. I mean, it was just like one after another. Anyway, somebody will remember.
Anyway, well, my big takeaway for this episode, George, is CERN is actually making a black hole, but it's not a physics black hole. It's a financial black hole. And that completely dovetails with Catherine Austin Fitts, because Catherine Austin, Daniel List asked Catherine Austin Fitts and Joseph Farrell all the time, well, where do you think the money went? And Catherine goes, I don't know. I think it went into space. I know it went into the space program, but I don't know where it went after it went into the space program. But just going into space, going into a black hole, I think that's a great metaphor. And the fact that maybe CERN really is just a giant Broadway show set, and they're not really doing anything there except building sets for Stanley Kubrick movies.
Hey, that's a good. I interviewed a PhD there, and we talked about Higgs boson, a particle physics person, and we talked about muons. And I said, boson, high energy particle, only lasts for a millionth of a second. Hard to even prove that you saw it unless you have a CERN high speed photography. She said, yep. I said, but muons, millions of muons have gone through us in the time we've had a discussion here, and I can use muons to find gold, can't I? Which one, if you're European Space Agency or you're CERN, which is going to be more interesting to the elites that have a whole bunch of mountains.
So is CERN doing a muon graph of the interior of the planet so that they know where every mineral is?
They use, you know what her answer to me was? No. Well, that's how they found the inside of the tombs. And she said, muography? Yeah, muography, we do that. That's how they found the inside of the tombs in Egypt, with muography. So they're not advertising this fact that this is how you find gold and silver and titanium and rare
everything.
Everything.
Right. So you can make a 3D map of every mineral deposit in the globe.
You got to have a receiver, you got to have a collector, you have to have a transmitter. But basically, my theory is that you can.
Or how about a lot of receivers going around the globe like Starlink? Do you need?
Maybe.
So you have a transmitter at CERN, and then you have the receivers in the in the stratosphere.
Yeah. Maybe what I would do is I would have it very focused, because I would take previous geological studies, and then where somebody had 8 experts had said, I think it's there, and then put a focused beam through it and have a focused collector, like a real scientific experiment, and then I'd be rich, right? Like Elon Musk. Isn't that kind of like what Boring Machine does? Anyway. Speaking of Stanley Kubrick, if you talked about keyhole, and if you remember, when you go from the second or third dimension to the fourth dimension, the astronaut guy looks through a keyhole. And remember, the keyhole satellite was developed by Bissell, and the Corona camera, I think that there's a guy named Roger Corona that runs a company called Leidos. The task force was talking about Operation Blackjack. Anyway, the Corona camera is actually at the beginning. It's the voice of Hal and the face of Hal. So Kubrick was actually given the camera from the Corona satellite, keyhole satellite.
Who's given the lens?
The lens. Okay, but his daughter,
because he was making the movie Barry Lyndon, and it was the highest brightness in photography. We call it fast lenses. So the more light that it lets in, the faster the lens. And that lens that was the HAL 9000 lens was a lens that was lent to Kubrick when he made the movie Barry Lyndon, because he wanted to make a movie that was completely made with practical light, meaning the light that was there. And he had all of these elaborate scenes that were candle lit. And he wanted to be able to shoot with candlelight, and so he made that movie before he made 2001.
Well, the daughter of Stanley Kubrick, I talked to a guy who runs his sort of fan club. He actually had some of my books, and I sent some of my books. We met him in the airport. But she supposedly talked to her because when you look through the keyhole, you look at all the Nazi programs. That was a wink to all the Nazi programs that they had started. When you go from room to room to room, when they go into the fourth dimension at the end of the movie, everything that you see, supposedly, there's a little girl in the chair and all these things, everything's supposed to be a Nazi program that they somehow got the US government to pay for. The big wink at the end of the movie is because in 1969, January 20th, right? It's also, what else happened on January 20th that was significant? Something significant in history. I can't remember what it was. But January 20th, the moon landing, they thought everybody's going to lose interest now that we've gone to the moon. So they needed some juice to keep people interested in all the future space projects, like colonizing the moon, right? European Space Agency Pietro Benassi in 2015 wants to put Werner von Braun's colony on the moon. They're talking about the whole the Mars launch assembly, the whole thing we have in Cape Canaveral, redoing that on the moon. Pietro Benassi, and that becomes the launch platform. I think they've gone away from that.
I know that we're getting on and you want to get off.
I don't need to get off. I'll keep going.
Okay, well, if you want to keep going, all of this reminds me of a film that I saw that's supposedly a mockumentary, and I'm looking for it now, and I think it was called Operation Luna, Lune, and it was supposedly a mockumentary about how Stanley Kubrick helped the government to not fake the moon landing, to fake the photography of the moon landing. That is, the idea is that, and I was fascinated by this film when I started to watch it because I worked in a camera store when I was a kid, and I used to work with guys who were National Geographic photographers and stuff. And when they would go to Antarctica, like they had when they would go to the Sahara Desert, they would have real problems with their equipment. You know, Kodak film, like is designed to work between like 0 Fahrenheit and 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And if you take it out of that extreme, or if you move it through that extreme very quickly, you can have big problems with film. It stops working. It breaks in the camera. It's got all kinds of problems. And so the conceit of the film was that NASA could figure out how to get somebody to the moon. They couldn't figure out how to photograph it when they were there because none of the equipment would work. And so what they did is that they hired Stanley Kubrick to help them fake the photography. So that sounded like a reasonable conceit to me. But then the people who are in the movie who are telling the story, Henry Kissinger's in the movie. Okay? Alexander Haig is in the movie. Stanley Kubrick's widow is in the movie. How do you get Stanley Kubrick's widow, Alexander Haig, and Henry Kissinger together to make a mockumentary about how we faked the photography on the moon? Like, I don't think it's a mockumentary. I think it's probably true.
Yeah, she's supposed to be a big Trump supporter, and I guess she's bought some of my books. So big shout out to the daughter of Stanley Kubrick. But this also was Star Trek. The idea of Gene Roddenberry getting the interest in space again, because they had a real fear that, hey, this is our cash cow.
After he had done nothing except make bad cop movies. I mean, bad cop TV shows.
If you're diverting all the money, remember what the BlackBerry said. It was 365 327 365 360 327 360. They had the Carmen line number. If you're draining all the money, this is Catherine Austin Fitts thing, if you're draining all the money out of these space programs that are 40 years, 50 years out, this nuclear fusion is the same idea with the tokamak reactors, 40 years, 50 years out. If you're draining all the money and then all of a sudden the public loses interest, there goes your money supply for your bioweapons or whatever you really are spending the money on, a boring machine or whatever you're spending the money on, right? We obviously never did the lunar, this tokamak reactor in southern France is going to be, 50 years. So I do think if you go through that last final scene in 2001, Space Odyssey, it is sort of a Werner von Braun's sort of wet dream of all the projects that he was working on, and he had his Nazi kids working on. Somebody was saying it's Fort Story or Fort Smith. Can't remember the name of it, but there was a big meeting in Boston right after the war with 6 of his key guys, where all this was kind of whiteboarded, this kind of wish list.
Right. Well, there's Jay Dyer and a guy named Jay Widener also did, again, and these things are kind of like they're buried on Amazon Prime Gaia. So it's like that's where the truth goes to die, it seems to be. Jay Dyer and Jay Widener did a 2-parter, I believe, or it might have just been Jay Widener. Jay Widener so Jay Widener and Jay Dyer did a TV series called, I think, Esoteric Hollywood. And there was Jay Widener, they did 1 episode on Kubrick, but then Jay Widener also did a 2-part TV show on his own about Kubrick. And he explains how The Shining is actually explaining how Kubrick faked the moon landing. And there's all of these clues in it. The kid, when he's running up and down the hall, who's famously riding his big wheel down the hall, he's got an Apollo sweater on. The carpeting in the hallways of that hotel that he's riding around on is the same pattern as the launch pads at Cape Canaveral. Like there's the number of the room that he's in is like the launch pad number or something. There's all of this Apollo stuff.
They also look through a keyhole a lot in that movie as well.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
So there's a lot of so I'll give you now that we're this far into it, I can give you the task force thing about United Launch Alliance and Roger Krona. The Russian blood program that is being assigned to me is not mine. It's task forces. She had assigned this to this guy named Roger Krona. If you pronounce his name in German, he's a German speaker. His name is Krone. It's pronounced Corona. Okay, he is the one who came up with this idea of an alliance with Russia, because you get to test the blood all the time. Before every test that the astronauts do, you got to do a pre-test and you do a post-test. How was the astronauts' blood affected? And you could do all these extreme stress environments. This is the same idea behind the military games. You get a drug or doping test before, pre-test afterward. Same with the military games. Same with the Olympic games, that we have all these pre and post tests in extreme conditions. Okay, so this thing, United Launch Alliance, has been around since like '96. We killed our own space program in order to get the Russians drawn into it so we can get the Russian cosmonaut blood. And this idea of having a bio buffer in the Pale sounds like the craziest Nazi plan ever, but this is Roger Krone of Leidos's plan. He's the guy who came up with the nanodots. He's the guy who said, hey, let's have some kind of light that we can shine to see the nanodots, everything. This is Task Force's big thing. I think this is how they slapped this onto me. No, I was talking about Enrico Benassi doing nanodots. Now, there's also, I'll leave it there, but I'll just say there's one other thing that in Boston, I did go to this Chuck Lieber trial, and they were doing some kind of nanodot mesh that was going into the brain. And that could be, I'm not saying it's 5G, I'm not saying it's 6G, but they were trying to see how we could have this thing be activated because I don't know what, but thing that could be activated in some kind of situation, 6G, maybe 7G, in the brain. So that's also something to watch. When you bring in 1,000 talents and you have hundreds of students coming back and forth from Harvard, and they're going back and forth to Wuhan, and nobody says anything, that's a program. That's a program that has state sponsorship. It's not just Charles Lieber hiring a couple of postdocs. So,
all right, I have found it's okay. So it's called Operation Luna: Dark Side of the Moon.
Here we go.
And I probably can play the trailer. Let me see.
Does this remind you of your X-Files days? Now we're getting into the space.
Kind of. It's weird. Let me see. Operation Luna. Here we go. So here's the name of the movie: Operation Luna: Dark Side of the Moon, and the award-winning film exposes how Stanley Kubrick faked the 1969 moon landing. Okay, so when I saw this, I thought, how come I've never heard of this movie before? Featuring interviews of many key players from NASA, Operation Luna navigates the viewer through the lies and the truth, the fact and the fiction. This is no ordinary documentary. It's intended to inform and entertain the viewer, but also to shake him up, make him aware that that one should always view television with a critical eye. Now, look at this. It says this video is currently unavailable to watch in your location. Interesting. Now, I used to watch this now. Okay, everybody, let's go find this movie. Somebody's got a copy of this movie. But when Kissinger is sitting and talking about how they brought this idea to Nixon, and Nixon said, "Let's go for it." It's like I believed him. I thought, why would Henry Kissinger make a mockumentary? And I think that what they did is that they made this movie and they thought, oh, there's no way that we can actually release this. And they said, well, what if we tell people it's really a joke?
Yeah, it could be. Borman was Dave Underdown answered the question about Borman's son in Congo. with
Right,
IG
Borman.
Farben a while back. And this one here, I definitely think Kissinger was very much a part of bringing in Werner von Braun and the whole team. And they had to decide, how do we hide this thing? How do you hide it from everybody, the McDuffs of the world? And the only place I could find that was hidden from all the McDuff files, we looked at the 60,000 files and everything, the only thing was hidden is Department of Energy, Q level clearance. That's the only thing that McDuff didn't aggregate in 52 or 53 or 54, I can't remember which year, for Hoover, for all the people coming in. The only loophole, the Q loophole I call it, is the only way you could get these people in was through some kind of association with either space, uranium, or something along that. Here we go.
Yeah, no, this is just the Jay Widener thing that I was also bringing up. So, oh, look, this seems to have video on it. Let's see if that works.
Kubrick also died weird.
Oh yeah, he died right after making Eyes Wide Shut, which he shot at the Rockefeller, at the Rothschild's mansion.
Kubrick had pasted together what the interior of a B-52 looked like by taking many separate photos from military magazines and putting them together. The end result was an astonishingly close replica of the actual interior of a B-52. But it was the exterior shot of the B-52 that really excited the boys in the Pentagon. It was sometime in the fall of 1963 or the winter of 19...
Come on, babe.
Well, Dr. Strangelove, another classic, talks about a doomsday machine, which is like a bioagent. This reminds me of the atomic bomb explosion thing that they did on the field that looked like a bio bomb exploding. They did a simulation of the atomic bomb exploding.
Dr. Strangelove.
In
this cold
I want to talk about that one second.
Stuffings out of all things that America held sacred. But there was something else that struck them about Stanley Kubrick's dark comedy, and that was the scenes both inside and outside the B-52s. Kubrick had pasted together what the interior of a B-52 looked like by taking many separate photos from military magazines and putting them together. The end result was an astonishingly close replica of the actual interior of a B-52. But it was the exterior shot of the B-52 that really excited the boys in the Pentagon. It was sometime in the fall of 1963 or the winter of 1964 that they contacted Stanley Kubrick and offered him a deal that he could not refuse. It was a deal with the devil in a way, or at least that is how Stanley Kubrick came to view it.
I guess that's it.
Well, I think this connection with Kissinger is very interesting because in that movie, which is Dr. Strangelove, Peter Sellers plays Henry Kissinger, and even in '63, go back to when this movie was made, right?
He actually plays a guy from Rand. I'm reading a book called Warriors of Reason, I think. Let me see what it's called. And there's a crazy guy at Rand that full Operation Luna movie on YouTube, Duke. Okay, Perfect Storm, give me a link and share the link with everyone, and then we'll share.
Pietro Benassi, you're not allowed to just say that it exists. You have to leave a link.
Right.
I love it when Pietro dials in. No, I'm kidding. I love Perfect Storm. It seems a lot like Pietro, but I don't want to say it's Pietro.
So anyway, let me stop this. Yeah, so let's get the Operation Luna. If it is on YouTube, then I definitely wanted to pull up the here. I'll see if I can find it before them. Herman Kahn. Yeah, Dave Underdown. Again, Dave Underdown. It's Herman Kahn.
Well, don't get me started on the Hudson Institute. Because Carter Page worked for the Hudson Institute, and so did George Papadopoulos, the two guys who do the East Med pipeline, who we're supposed to believe are victims in the Trump campaign. Come on, man.
So George, one of the hypotheses, and I can't remember if it's Dr. Farrell or Francis Connolly that I was listening to, but it occurred to me. I know that you have all these doubts about the Nazi bell, right? And you said that Farrell said that it flew. I think that I've heard Farrell say that Farrell never said that it flew. Farrell said that there's a German writer that he quotes that says that when they energized it, it lifted off the ground a couple of feet. But that's, I haven't read the whole Bell book yet, so I'm not there yet. But the hypothesis that I heard, and I again, I don't know if it was Connolly or Farrell, was that at the end of the war, the Germans had all of this. I think it was Farrell that that Bormann saw that it was not going to work out well and started divvying up through Alan Dulles, started divvying up the technology between the Soviets and the Americans in order to create this balance of power. But the thing that they reserved for themselves was this one piece of technology that I think it was Farrell, hypothesized might be a doomsday weapon. And maybe the ultimate power that the ex-Nazis from World War II still have, and maybe it's something that's in Switzerland, or maybe it's someplace else, or maybe it's in South America, is the ultimate weapon is the thing that will kill everybody. Like, do what we say or we'll kill everybody. And I thought, well, that completely dovetails with Dr. Strangelove.
Yeah, a series of nuclear devices that, trigger each other like dominoes would be something.
Right.
It won't let me share links in the chat. I'm not sure that's
perfect.
Right.
Is that true?
Is
Producer
that true?
Carrie is saying that's true. Okay, so let me see if I can go find it then. Project. What did I say?
Well, share everything but the HTTPS then. Just share the.
Yeah, Just share.
Yeah.
Share. Just give me
because the link checker is only checking to see if it's HTTPS fully formed.
Yeah.
Just delete the HTTPS off, or delete the.
Or just give me that YouTube code that's at the end of the.
Yeah. Just the video ID code at the end.
Yeah, exactly.
But so we were on the Bell. Okay, so here's what I think Farrell's onto, and there's a lot of Farrell that I carve away.
Right.
But if you were trying to demonstrate some type of technology at the end, where you could say that there was a nuclear reaction, right, that would generate enough heat that you could strip all the electrons off the atoms and create a plasma, right? And you need an outer plasma to keep it cold, right? And to have a containment vessel. This is how tokamak and everybody works. You have the super high hot plasma on the inside, okay? And then you spin the plasma, it will release, just like anything under pressure where you have a way of disposing things. And if it did ride up a pole, like Farrell says, you could say, hey, this is the future because we're going to be getting away from fuels. We can cut the fuel supply of our competitors, right? And now we'll have this nuclear fuel. It's also a way to get Q clearances because you tell everybody, look, the future is going to be nuclear. So we all need Q clearances. As a Q loophole, a fishing rod, not a Q loophole like a loophole, actually a hole that you would have for catching the fish, but a Q loop pole, I could see. Because that way you convince everybody when you're putting them, trying to get them by McDuff again. You got to get them by FBI. You got to get them by McDuff. We need to give this guy a Q level clearance. Why? He's just working on a liquid oxygen thing that you guys been firing at London with V1 and V2. Why does he need a Q level clearance? Oh, because we're going to be going to plasma. We're going to be going to plasma. And if you look at the Mars project, they're talking about plasma. Klaus Schwab, again, talking about the plasma turbines and plasma turbines. So I think this is this kind of thing where nobody quite understands the technology. Tokamak's 40 years away, right? As far as Southern France is concerned, let's hit them with the plasma. So Farrell may be right that they use red mercury because red mercury would have the liquid metallic substance, transfer of heat, all that. A lot of the things Farrell says about this, if it's just used as a demonstration technology, a proof of concept, try to fool a few army generals, I'm with him all the way. When he starts saying, here are sightings that we've seen at Area 51, then I'm like, oh, I'm out. I'm done. I'm cashing the chips. But if he's talking about a proof of concept in the Owl Mountains, I'm with him 100%.
Right. Well, I think
because
that's
if you look at the bell, it looks a lot like the lunar limb.
Well, and if you look at the bell, it also looks at this like this thing that crashed in Missouri too. I can't remember what it was called.
Yeah, that thing.
That thing. Anyway.
So Farrell, like everybody, I never say the whole thing, throw out all the baby with the bathwater, because he's great. He's got a lot of stuff on the Nazis. This Tino guy who goes in with a LiDAR and follows up on all the Farrell things by actually crawling down the holes. I love that guy because he's actually out there, out of his mother's basement. So I never, ever say throw it all away. I always say keep the baby. And, you know, show me some red mercury. I mean, wouldn't there be a few red mercury particles on the floor if you were showing the top brass this technology? I don't know. Maybe they were just showing plans of cartoons. You know, the guy who did the cartoons to try to get the German kids into space and math and science and math, I can't remember his name, but he was the same guy who then got hired by Disney to try to get American kids into science and math. Same guy. 10 years later, they used the same guy, the cartoonist, to get people in science and math in Germany that they used in the United States in the 50s. Can't remember his name. Nazi cartoonist for space program.
Okay, I found a low resolution version of it on YouTube, and I'm looking. Oh, wait, here's here's Donald Rumsfeld. Hang on a second. See if I can bring this up. Share screen, Brave tab. This is. I apologize for the low resolution here, but it's what I could find. And here we got Donald Rumsfeld. I'll see if I can find. If I scroll down here, maybe I can find Kissinger. But let's hear what Rumsfeld has to say here.
Somebody. He is impressive, and he is a balanced, rational man. And he also has some courage to say that, what he'd said. And from there on, it played out exactly as he suggested.
He had very great common sense. He was a very dedicated personality, and my relations with him were wonderful.
Kissinger was the key person. Yeah, that's right.
And he was very much challenged by this project.
That did take a long time, but everybody was very interested that it could be done at all.
I mean, we have never done this like this. True, yes, we haven't. So that's one reason to try.
They tried and tried, and it didn't look right. I remember the thing with the stars. They had huge sheets of paper, and they were little pinholes.
Everybody should realize what an achievement it was to do that.
Kissinger was so nervous that he packed his passport, you know, in the big suitcase and things like that. He was very unlike himself.
It finally worked, and Kissinger was very, very, very pleased with the result. It looked fantastic.
Hippity hoppity, hippity hoppity, hippity hopping over hill and dale. Da 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 da. Hippity hopping along.
C'est de la folie. This is stupid. There is no reason not. You know, people come out with crazy ideas about anything.
I know about these stories about the pictures from of rehearsals or pictures that are.
Anyway, so everybody can watch this. I find it fascinating that they got Alexander Haig, Donald Rumsfeld, Henry Kissinger, and Stanley Kubrick's widow to participate in a mockumentary. It's like, how does that happen?
Well, people are saying, you know, it's fun going back in the history. I have to make my apologies right now. I was ahead of the game in Basel, ahead of the game at BIS. The 750 billion hasn't come down yet, but when it does, you'll go, I remember George Webb saying that. So we should just make T-shirts that say, I remember when George Webb said that 5 years ago. I think that would be a big seller, Peter. The only thing is you'd have to change it every year. It would have to, I remember 6 years ago when George Webb said that. I remember 7 years ago.
Right, well, it become like a collector's thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we've had fun. It's been real, and let's do it again on. Are we going to do Thursday?
It's been real fun. Yeah, we could do Thursday.
Let's do Thursday at 5.
I'm back. I went to San Diego for a while, then I went to Minnesota for a while, so I'm back.
So please buy Peter a coffee since he moved me to the top of a column, and not really to the top of the page. But buy him a coffee anyway, and buy a T-shirt. Buy a T-shirt.
You got to work your way up there, George.
Yeah. No, I'll work my way up.
Yeah.
Right. By the way, also right here is my stuff. If you want it.
Yeah, down there you can support George at paypal.me/George Swigert, George's basketball name, or Venmo.com/GeoWebb, which is like geospatial only with web.
Yeah. And by the way, James Webb Space Telescope. I announced this thing about the over the horizon. And what do? They announce the James Webb, and they do the first pictures of the James Webb Space Telescope the same day.
So why don't you think it's the James Webb Telescope instead of the Hubble?
Well, because it's out at the longer point or whatever. It's 1 million miles from Earth, whereas the Hubble is only like 340. That's really nothing. I mean, I get much bigger, like it's inverse the square of the distance. So I think there was some time though, because you got 100 times bigger mirror on the James Webb, right?
Yeah.
There was some time where it took
as it was
leaving, month. It took a whole month to get out there,
and it's nice because the subject is just spinning around once every 24 hours. It gives you a whole.
There was a whole month there where I looked at it, and I don't think even at 1 million miles out with these new pictures, I think I can figure out what kind of vape the Russian general is vaping. Somebody mentioned Lados, by the way, and Bob Malone.
Maybe it was mango jewel pods. That's how they got him.
Bob Malone's always bragging about Lados. And he's always bragging about Lados and how he's working with Lados and imaging with Lados. Lados is the thing that you go through at the airport. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, he's the #1 guy with the nanoparticle uptake. This is his program for vape and vax.
It would be very easy to turn those machines at the airport into nanoparticle scanners too.
I think that's the downstream. I don't think Chertop's there yet, but I think that's where they want to get to. They want to say, hey, the specific enough nanodots to say, this guy, I don't care what his passport says, he was at the May Day thing and he put his hands inside the rocket launcher, the Unha 3, and that's the guy we want. And so, who knows?
Right.
Who knows?
Who knows? But with that, we'll see everybody next week. Thank you, George. I'm sorry.
Thursday at 5.
Thursday you and producer Carrie both hit me at the same time, right?
Okay. All right. Like a collider. Like a collider. Think of muons.
Like a collider. And let's not forget the black hole of CERN. We'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.